In his travelogue, Travels with Charlie, American author John Steinbeck wrote, "The redwoods, once seen, leave a mark or create a vision that stays with you always. From them comes silence and awe. They are the ambassadors from another time." The coast from central California north to the Oregon border is the perfect environment for the redwoods. Heavy rain in winter, moist fog captured on their leaves in dry summer. Left untouched as they were for 200 million years, these giants of the forest grow up to 300 feet, 100 metres. Before Europeans arrived in the 1850s, coastal redwoods covered some 2 million acres, around 800,000 hectares of northern California. Native Americans harvested the fallen trees to make canoes and planks for housing. Berries, nuts and leaves were sourced for food, medicines to cure headaches, stomach pain and treat infections. Branches were turned into bowls and utensils. Fronds and leaves made ropes, baskets, bedding and dyes. So deep was their connection, some of the tribes developed a deep cultural and spiritual relationship with the redwoods. Many regarded them as sacred, gifts from a creator. That was until the 1850s. The gold rush brought 300,000 people to Northern California. Within a few decades, the old-growth redwood forests were stripped with a voracious appetite. The timber, highly prized for its workability and durability, fed the insatiable demand for homes, businesses and mines. Logging became the leading manufacturing industry in the American West. It was so devastating that by the late 1800s, less than 40 years after the gold rush, there were concerns that the redwood forests could disappear forever. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt spent 3 nights camping among the redwood forests in Yosemite, which he described as like lying in a great solemn cathedral, far vaster and more beautiful than any built by the hand of man. Cut down one of these giants and you cannot fill its place. The ages were their architects, and we owe it to ourselves and to our children's children to preserve them. The following year, he signed the Antiquities Act, which gave the President power to bypass slow-moving Congress to protect national monuments such as the redwood forests. A timely intervention, but even then almost too late. But it was a first step, the first of many by governments and passionate conservationists who bought more than 100,000 acres which were dedicated as state parks. But the logging of privately owned redwood forests continued unabated, with such intensity that by the 1960s only 10% of the old-growth forests remained. In 1968, President Lyndon Johnson signed a law creating the Redwood National Park, and in 1980, Redwood National and State Parks were inscribed by the United Nations as a World Heritage Site. Cross this bridge and you are crossing from a forest of newly planted Douglas fir trees into a forest of ancient redwoods which were never logged. It's like walking through an environmental time warp. Although the national park protected pockets of old growth, logging continued for another decade right up to the boundary. The environmental battles were being won, but they were far from over. Today, only 5% of the world's old-growth redwood forests remain. According to the US National Park Service, nearly half of that is in Redwood National and State Parks. The rest is on privately owned land. Management plans are being put into place to preserve what is still there and protect regrowth of young redwoods. One organisation, Save the Redwoods League, formed more than a century ago, has bought a total of 225,000 acres. In the past decade alone, it has paid $40 million US buying 2 parcels of land. One of them now the largest private sequoia forest in the world, the other an easement that preserves streams and groves of old-growth redwoods. According to the League, it's not intended to make a park out of every acre of redwood forest, but to work sustainably with private landowners to make sure no more is lost. The National Park Service estimates that tourism to Redwood National Park contributes $37 million to the local economy, with more than 400,000 visitors a year. Landowners also cash in on redwood trees on their land, such as the world-famous drive-through trees, where you can pay $15 just to drive through the heart of a giant redwood tree. The biggest privately owned tourist attraction in the Redwood Forest is at Klamath, in the heart of the Redwood National Park, where the Trees of Mystery was established in 1945, offering a mile of trails through the redwoods. It's here that you can walk not just through the tree line, but 100 feet or 30 metres in the canopy above, where the old-growth forest reaches for the sky. At the heart of the Trees of Mystery is the Brotherhood tree, dedicated to the brotherhood of man. A tree said to be over 2,000 years old, 297 feet tall, 19 feet in diameter and 60 feet in circumference. To experience the full majesty of the redwood forests, the Avenue of Giants in Humboldt Redwood State Park is the crowning glory, home to some of the tallest trees in the world. Perhaps the most spectacular is the tree known as the Dyersville Giant, a giant redwood that once stood 362 feet before it fell in 1991. The crash was registered on a nearby seismograph, and one local who heard it come down from half a mile away thought it was a train crash. The tallest tree still standing is the Founders Tree, honouring the founders of the Save the Redwood League. At 346 feet, 107 metres, it's higher than a 30-storey skyscraper. Scientists now fear that the biggest threat to redwood forests isn't logging, it's climate change. Researchers have found increasing frequency of intense wildfires and mudslides, rising temperatures, prolonged drought, reduced winter rainfall, and critically, a 1/3 reduction in the all-important summer fog in Northern California. They say the redwoods have weathered climate change before, but not the way they are seeing it now. Northern California isn't the only place in the world where redwoods grow. In Australia, there are 3 plantations. The biggest is at Pyalago in the national capital, right next to where Canberra Airport is now located. In 1918, Walter Burley Griffin, the American who designed the national capital, insisted on planting 122,000 redwood trees as part of his grand plan. It was against the strong advice of the national capital's arborist, who argued that Canberra's hot, dry climate was totally unsuited to redwoods. It turns out he was right. Within 3 years of planting, only 35,000 trees, less than a third, survived. Against all odds, a century later, 3,000 trees had survived Canberra's hot, dry climate, fires, drought, and extensions to the Canberra airport. But in 2020, reportedly only 900 still thrive in this 12-hectare plantation. The other stands of redwood trees in Australia are in rain-drenched Victoria, in the Great Otway National Park west of Melbourne, and in Yarra Range National Park near Warburton, where they have survived and thrived. If the redwoods can survive in Canberra, there's still hope that the world hasn't yet seen the last of this magnificent giant of the forest.